I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the empty space where my car should have been. It wasn't the kind of absence you overlook, teen. No, it was the kind that grabs the back of your neck and whispers, "You're not imagining this." The pale rectangle of dust on the garage floor, the faint smell of gasoline still lingering in the air, the single abandoned key hook on the wall, all of it sent a cold ripple through my chest. My 1966 Lincoln Continental Turtle, Henry's car, our car, was gone. I had no idea why. At 8:03, my mind is still sharp enough to slice paper. I remember birthdays, recipes, street names from 50 years ago. I remember the sound of Henry's laughter when he first revved that engine. I remember everything that matters.
But that morning, standing in the dim echo of my own garage, I heard myself whisper, "Did I forget something? Did I agree to something?" My hand trembled against the doorframe, not from age, from something else, a feeling I hadn't known since the day we folded the American flag at Henry's funeral. Betrayal. But the betrayal hadn't happened yet. Not fully. Not clearly. I only sensed it then, the way an old wound throbs right before the storm breaks. I stepped further into the garage, letting my fingers skim the air where the car should have been. And then I saw it, a scrap of paper on the floor, folded twice, like someone had dropped it in a hurry. Calvin's handwriting, slanted, rushed. To casual, "Mom, don't worry about the car. I'm handling things." Handling what? My breath hitched. I felt my pulse in my throat, and a strange, metallic ringing began in my ears, a sound I hadn't heard in decades. Not since the day the doctor told me Henry wouldn't be coming home from the hospital. A sound that meant something was breaking. And somehow, I already knew who was holding the hammer. I backed out of the garage, gripping the wall for balance, and the house seemed different, dimmer, tilted, as though someone had rearranged the air inside it. Had he been here while I slept? Had he walked through my kitchen, my living room, my memories, taking what he wanted with quiet fingers? Why didn't I hear him? I walked to the hallway, shoes tapping softly on the hardwood, and my eyes landed on another absence, the framed picture of Henry and me at Lake Superior. Gone? The small clock from the mantel. Gone? The antique lamp from the reading corner, the one my mother left me. Gone? Pieces of my life, missing, and suddenly, the room felt smaller, too warm, too silent. I pressed a hand to my chest. "Oh, dear God, Calvin, what did you do?" But before the fear could settle, footsteps approached, real ones, soft ones, belonging to no ghost of memory. "Mom, you awake?" Calvin's voice called from somewhere near the kitchen. A chill stole down my spine. I turned toward him slowly, not trusting my voice yet, not trusting the way my heart shook like a leaf in wind. He stepped into view, 40, clean-shaven, handsome in the way men become handsome when they smile too little and worry too much. His eyes darted from me to the hallway, to the garage door I'd left open. "Oh," he said, "you found out early." Found out what early? He slipped his phone into his back pocket, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and sighed. The kind of sigh that tries to sound tired instead of guilty. "Mom, listen. We need to talk." My fingers curled against my palm. "Where is the car?" He forced a smile, too tight around the edges. "It's being handled." "You used that word already." "Well," he shrugged. "It's true." "Calvin," I said, my voice low enough to make him shift his feet. "Tell me where my car is." He blinked, twice, then plastered on a practiced expression. patient, gentle, condescending. Mom, you've been forgetting things. You said yourself you've been overwhelmed, and the house is a lot to manage. The car was just the first step. My breath froze. First step toward what? His answer came so easily it felt rehearsed. A care home. My body went cold. I'm not moving anywhere. You already signed the forms. No, I whispered. I didn't. You did. He insisted. Last week. You probably don't remember. He said it like he was explaining the weather. Something natural and undeniable. But I remember last week clearly. The smell of lemon pie cooling on my counter. The sound of the neighbor's dog barking. The blue scarf I misplaced behind the armchair. I remember everything. But Calvin was counting on me doubting myself. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mom, this is for the best. Trust me, trust. How could I trust the son who wouldn't look me in the eyes? How long have you been planning this? I asked quietly. He hesitated. Only half a second, but I caught it. A while. I mean, I've been worried. You could fall. You could get hurt. And I can't always be here. I'm doing what any good son would do. Good son. The words tasted bitter. And the car? I asked. He exhaled. Mom, it's an old car. You don't drive anymore. It was just sitting there collecting dust. That wasn't your decision to make. He opened his mouth. But I lifted a hand. The same hand that once held his when he cried over a scraped knee. And something changed in his eyes. A flicker of irritation. Look, he said sharply. The papers are signed. The deposit is paid. The room is reserved. We're leaving in an hour. Leaving? My throat tightened. Where? To Sunfield Manor. A nursing home. A temporary care home. He'd said earlier. But now the truth slipped out raw without the sugarcoating. He moved toward the hallway, grabbing my coat from the rack. Just until you're settled. Just until things get sorted. Sorted? My life wasn't a drawer he could reorganize. But he didn't see me. Not really. He saw burden, responsibility, opportunity. Calvin, I whispered, my voice breaking. Why are you doing this? He didn't even pause. It's complicated. No. It was in single quotes T. It was simple. He needed money, and I was the easiest thing to sell. I felt something inside me tighten, sharpen. Not anger, not yet. Something older, something anchored to survival. I breathed in slowly. The way Henry taught me the day our daughter was born, and the pain came like a wave in, out. My mind began to clear. If Calvin thought I was powerless, he was wrong. But I played along. For now. Fine, I said softly. He turned, surprised by how quickly I surrendered. Good. Let him think he'd won. Let him think I was fragile. Let him think I was small. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that the papers he'd sold the car with, the ownership documents he thought he had, weren't the real ones. He didn't know I kept the originals hidden somewhere he'd never think to look. He didn't know who I'd call the moment I found a phone that wasn't his. And he didn't know that this moment, this quiet, trembling morning, would be the last time he ever underestimated me. Not yet. But he would go. He would. Calvin drove me to Sunfield Manor as if he were delivering a package he was desperate to be rid of. The car hummed beneath us. Not my car, of course, but his dented, sour-smelling sedan. The one he bought after he crashed the truck he swore he'd never crash. He kept glancing at me, then away, like he was expecting me to crumble or protest. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I kept my hands folded over my purse. My gaze on the world sliding past the window. Bare trees, frost-shivered lawns, winter sunlight scraping across old rooftops. Everything looked brittle, as though one wrong touch could shatter it. Like he wanted to shatter me. The engine made a whining sound as we climbed the small hill toward the building. Sunfield Manor rose ahead, pale and sterile, like someone had taken a hospital and dipped it in beige paint. A row of shrubs lined the walkway, pruned to neatly, like they'd cut even the wildness out of the plants. Calvin cleared his throat. "It's a good place, Mom. You'll see." I didn't respond. He parked, stepped out quickly, and came around to my door. "Let me help you. I can manage." My voice was firm, and for a moment, he hesitated, as if he'd forgotten I still had a spine. Inside the lobby, the air smelled like disinfectant and overcooked oatmeal, the kind that sits too long on a steam table. A Christmas wreath hung over the reception desk despite it being January. The receptionist, a young girl with a clipped ponytail, greeted Calvin with a smile too friendly to be genuine. "You must be Margaret. We've been expecting you." Expecting me, as if I had arranged this, as if I had chosen betrayal. "My son arranged everything," I said, my tone polite, my eyes sharp. She tapped her keyboard. "Yes, we have all the forms. Room to 114. He already paid the first 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 3 weeks he planned for me to be gone from my own home. 3 weeks to sell everything I owned." "Mom," Calvin cut in, "they'll bring your suitcase up later. Let's just get you settled." I followed him down the hallway. A long corridor washed in artificial light, with the faint sound of a television echoing from a distant room. Doors lined both sides, each with a name taped neatly beside it. 2 nurses walked past us, pushing a cart. One of them gave me a small, sympathetic smile. I returned it automatically, though pity from strangers often feels like dust on my palms. Something to wipe away. Finally, Calvin opened the door to 214. The room was small. A bed, a dresser, a window overlooking a parking lot, a chair by the wall. My suitcase sat at the foot of the bed. Nothing of mine. Nothing that smelled like home. "This will be good for you," Calvin said, as if he believed it. I remained in the doorway. "How long will I be here?" "Just until things settle. A few months. Maybe more." Months. A hollow feeling cracked beneath my ribs. He wasn't unsure. He was rehearsing the sound of permanence on his tongue. "Calvin," I said quietly, "look at me." He did, reluctantly. "You took my car." His face twitched. "Mom, we talked about that." "No, you talked, and you lied." He opened his mouth, but I lifted a finger, and he stopped. "You walked into my home without asking. You took things without asking. You made decisions without asking, all while expecting me to nod like a child." His jaw clenched. "I'm trying to help." "No," I said. "You're trying to hide something." His eyes flickered. Guilt, irritation, fear. Then came the practiced sigh, the one I'd heard too many times since he turned 30, and began confusing irresponsibility with misfortune. "I don't have time for this," he muttered. "I've got things to handle." "I'm sure you do." He stared at me for a long second, as if waiting for me to plead or beg or soften. I didn't. "Fine," he said finally. "I'll check in later." And he left. Just like that. No hug, no goodbye, no reassurance, just the sound of his footsteps fading down the hallway, each step carving a deeper hollow inside me. I exhaled slowly and stepped into the room. The air felt dry. The walls felt too close. The bed, crisp and newly made, looked like a stranger's bed. Then, a soft knock. I turned. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-50s. Dark curly hair pulled into a bun that refused to stay neat. She wore the standard soft blue scrubs, but her posture wasn't stiff like the others. There was something warm in her eyes, something like kindness seasoned with patience. "Mrs. Parker?" she asked. "Yes. I'm Nurse Donnie. I'll be checking on you during your stay." I didn't answer right away. She studied me for a moment, not in the clinical, assessing way I'd come to expect from medical staff, but in a gentle, human way. The way someone looks when they recognize another bruised soul. "You don't seem convinced this is where you want to be," she said softly. I let out a subtle breath. "You're observant. I've been here 18 years. She smiled faintly. "People usually come in with either fear, acceptance, or confusion. You have something else in your eyes. What do you see?" She tilted her head. "Purpose." I blinked. Purpose was not a word anyone had used about me in decades. She stepped further inside. "If you need anything, water, extra blankets, someone to talk to, you let me know. I'm good at listening." I hesitated, then nodded as she walked toward the dresser, setting down a small clipboard. "We'll need to go over your intake forms later, but for now, why don't you rest a?" She stopped mid-sentence, frowning at the papers clipped beneath her hand. "What?" I asked. "These signatures," she murmured, leaning closer. "They don't match." My heart tripped. "What do you mean?" She lifted the form and pointed to signatures labeled Margaret Parker. One was my actual handwriting. The other was not even close. A jolt went through me. Double quotes, "Mrs. Parker," she said quietly. "Did you sign these?" "No." She looked at the door Calvin had exited through minutes earlier. Her eyes darkened in understanding. "I see." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, full of unspoken truth. Finally, she closed the folder. "Do you have anyone at all, you trust?" "My lawyer," I whispered. "Good, because this," she tapped the forged signature, "is illegal." I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not fragility, a steady flame, small, but warm enough to fight back the cold. "Can I call him from here?" I asked. Nurse Donnie glanced at the hallway, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Yes," she said, "but not from the room phone. Those calls are recorded." She reached into her pocket and slipped me a small, older model cell phone. "Use this." My breath trembled. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. She met my eyes, sincere, unwavering. "Because," she said, "I've seen too many people come through those doors after being silenced by family. And you," her voice softened, "you still have fight left in you." A warmth stung my eyes. "You remind me of my mother." I closed my fingers around the phone. The weight of it felt like power in my palm. "Thank you," I whispered. She gave me a slow nod. "Call your lawyer. Then we'll go from there." She stepped toward the door, paused, and added, "And Mrs. Parker, whatever your son did or didn't do, you're not alone in this place. Not anymore." The door closed gently behind her. I sat on the bed, heart steadying itself with each breath, and opened the phone. For the first time since that morning in my garage, I felt something like strength returning. Not the kind you shout with, but the kind you build quietly, like a fortress taking shape one hidden brick at a time. I dialed my lawyer's number, and as the phone rang, I knew with certainty Calvin had no idea what storm he had set in motion. The phone rang twice before I heard the familiar click, followed by a deep, steady voice I'd known since Henry's funeral. "This is Attorney Michael Grant." "Michael," I whispered. It's Margaret. There was a pause. Then the kind of inhale a man takes when he already senses trouble. Margaret. Are you all right? You sound off. I glanced at the closed door, then lowered my voice. My son put me in a nursing home without my consent. The silence on the line sharpened. Repeat that. He said. He forged my signature on the admission forms. He sold my car, and possibly other things in my home. I need to know what I can do. Another pause. Longer this time, but not because he doubted me. No, I heard the familiarity of controlled anger simmering below his measured tone. Where are you? Sunfield Manor. Room 214. I'll be there in an hour. Michael. Wait, I clutched the phone tighter. Be discreet. I don't want my son to know I'm contacting you. Understood, he said. Leave that to me. And Margaret. Don't sign anything. Not a scrap of paper. Not a form. Not a waiver. Nothing. I won't. Good? Stay calm. I'm coming. The call ended. I closed the phone slowly, my thumb trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. 4 weeks, maybe months, I'd felt something shifting inside Calvin. A hardness, a distance, a strange urgency that made him pace more, talk less, and sigh constantly as if his own life were dragging behind him like a stubborn child. But betrayal. Betrayal you never see in its full shape until it stands in front of you, holding your belongings in its hands. I placed the phone beneath my pillow just as Nurse Donnie returned, pushing a small cart of folded linens. Everything all right? She asked. Yes, I said softly. He'll be here soon. She nodded, setting a thin blanket at the foot of the bed. Good. And whatever happens next, know that I'm on your side. It was such a simple sentence, and yet it landed in my chest with the weight of a blessing. Someone was on my side. Someone believed me. Someone saw me, truly saw me, not as an old woman fading into the edges of her life, but as a human being still capable of fighting back. After she left, I stayed seated on the bed for a long time, listening to the faint hum of the hallway, a wheelchair rolling past, a nurse calling out meds, a distant television blaring the afternoon news. Sunfield Manor was quieter than I expected, but not peaceful, more like a place suspended between lives, where people waited for time to pass, meals to arrive, pills to take, a place where clocks seemed louder than conversations. My mother once said that growing old feels like losing your reflection in the window. But sitting in that room, I didn't feel faded. No. I felt sharpened, as though the edges of my soul were being honed by necessity. After 20 minutes, the door creaked open again. A different nurse, younger, blonde hair slipping from her bun, entered with a clipboard. Mrs. Parker? I need you to sign your medication update. No, I said simply. She blinked. It's just a routine, I said no. Her lips parted, surprise flickering across her face. The elderly here must comply often. A quiet current of surrender. She wasn't used to being told no. She left silently, and I wondered if she'd report me. But I didn't care. I had been underestimated enough for one lifetime. Another 20 minutes passed. Then I heard footsteps. Firm, confident, purposeful. They halted near my door. A soft knock followed. Mrs. Parker? It was Michael. I opened the door. He wore a charcoal gray coat and carried an old leather briefcase. That had been his companion longer than some marriages. His salt and pepper hair was wine-tousled, and his face, that sharp, dependable face, softened when he saw me. Margaret, he said softly. What in God's name happened? Come inside. He entered, glanced around the small room, and shut the door behind him. I recounted everything. The missing car, the strange note, the forged signatures, the sudden insistence on the nursing home. He listened with his arms crossed, leaning against the dresser, his brows drawn tight. When I finished, he inhaled slowly. "This is bad," he said. "Legally bad. Morally worse. Can we stop him?" He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I brought a copy of your estate and property documents, including the car title." Relief flooded me. "The originals are still safe?" "Of course," he said. "You kept the signed copies in my office vault years ago, remember?" "I did. Henry insisted on it when we bought the car. In case something happens," he'd said. "You protect what matters, Maggie." Michael set the folder on my lap. "Calvin couldn't have legally sold your car," he said firmly. "Not without the original title. At best, he convinced someone to buy it under fraudulent terms. That's his problem now." A tremor of vindication ran through me. "What about the forged signatures here?" I asked, pointing to the admission forms. "That is criminal," he said. "Healthcare fraud, identity fraud, financial exploitation. The state does not take this lightly." "But he's my son," I whispered. "He'll say he was helping." Michael sighed. "The law cares about consent, not sentiment. And you did not consent." I lowered my gaze. "He'll be furious when he finds out." "Let him," Michael replied. "My job isn't to protect his feelings. It's to protect you." His voice had a warmth to it, protective, steadying, and for a moment I felt a grief I hadn't expected. Not grief for Calvin, but for the years I spent believing I'd raised him better. "Margaret." I looked up. "You don't owe him your dignity." Michael's voice softened. "And you don't owe him your silence." Something in me loosened. Then, a tension wrapped around my spirit like a stone wall finally cracking. "What do we do next?" I asked. Michael placed a single-page document in my hands. "This gives me temporary authority as your legal representative. Sign this, only this, and I can start the process of removing you from this facility and launching an investigation." I hesitated only a moment before signing. He nodded approvingly. "Good. I'll file it immediately. In the meantime, you stay put. Do not confront your son. Let me handle that." He stood to leave, then paused near the door. "One more thing," he added. "Do you have any idea how long Calvin has been struggling?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair. "He's months behind on his mortgage. He has 3 maxed out credit cards, and he withdrew a large amount of cash last week." My stomach twisted. "Why, I don't know, but his desperation is deeper than you think." He opened the door halfway, lowering his voice. "Margaret, this isn't about just money. Something else is driving him, something he hasn't told you." The hallway light cast a long shadow behind him, stretching into the room like a dark ribbon. And, suddenly, the feeling returned, that same cold ache I'd felt in the garage that morning. The sense that something was missing, something I hadn't discovered yet. Michael stepped back. "I'll be in touch within a few hours." He left. The door clicked shut. I sat alone in the room, the folder still open on my lap, my pulse steady but tightened, as though my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. Something was wrong, something bigger than forged signatures or sold cars, something that pulsed beneath Calvin's behavior like a hidden rot. And I knew, with a clarity that chilled me, I hadn't seen the worst of it yet. The hours after Michael left felt strangely elastic, stretching and tightening like a rubber band about to snap. I sat by the window, watching the dusk settle over the parking lot, washing everything in soft blue-gray light. Cars came and went. Families visited residents. Nurses exchanged shifts. Life moved in quiet circles. But inside me, something was changing. A realization was taking shape. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. Like fog lifting to reveal a landscape I didn't want to see. Michael's words kept echoing through my mind. His desperation is deeper than you think. I thought I knew my son's weaknesses. His impulsivity. His thirst for shortcuts. His habit of making excuses instead of amends. But desperation, that was new. Or maybe I had been too willing to excuse what I should have confronted. The sun had nearly disappeared when another knock sounded at my door. Timid, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Parker." It was Nurse Donnie again. She stepped inside carrying a cup of chamomile tea. "I wasn't sure if you liked tea," she said, setting it beside me, "but it's warm, and sometimes that's enough." "Thank you," I said softly. She pulled the chair closer. Sitting across from me, there was a carefulness about her, not the forced cheer nurses are often trained into, but something more intuitive, a gentleness she kept polished through years of witnessing other people's pain. "Your lawyer. Everything go all right?" "Yes," I said, "more than all right. He'll take care of everything." She nodded as though she expected that answer and wanted it to be true. "You look like you're thinking about something," she observed. "I am. Want to talk about it?" I hesitated, then surprised myself by saying, "Yes." She leaned back, giving me space. "I keep replaying the last few months," I said, trying to see the signs I should have noticed earlier, trying to understand how my son became someone who could do this. Her eyes softened. "People hide things from those they love most. That's the hardest truth of this job. I've seen children lie to their parents more than anyone else." "Why?" I whispered. "Because love gives them permission to. Or at least they think it does." My throat tightened. I don't know what pushed him to this point, but I can feel it. Something else is going on. Something he hasn't told me. She folded her hands in her lap, thinking, "Whatever it is, it isn't your fault." I let out a fragile breath. "I know that logically, but emotionally," she nodded. "Emotionally is different." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said something unexpected. "When my mother was dying, she asked me one question." Donnie's voice thinned, quieter. She said, "Did I raise you right? Did I make you into someone good?" I didn't know how to answer her. Because children, we get shaped by more than just our parents. The world changes us. Pain changes us. Fear changes us. She didn't cause any of the bad things I went through, but she still believed it was her responsibility. Her voice cracked, just for a second. But I heard it, felt it. So I told her the truth. She said, brushing a tear with the back of her hand, "Children choose who they become, not parents." Something inside me loosened, something tight and aching. "Thank you," I murmured. She offered a sad smile. "I should get back to my rounds. But if you need anything, press the call button. I'm here." After she left, the room felt different. Not lighter, but steadier. I sipped the tea, letting the warmth slide through me, and stared out the window at the deepening night. That's when I saw him, Calvin, standing alone in the parking lot, leaning against his car, head bowed, hands in pockets. He wasn't looking at the building. He was staring at the asphalt like it held answers he couldn't find. A cigarette glowed between his fingers. Though he'd sworn he quit years ago, he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not physically, emotionally. His shoulders were tight, hunched with tension. His face pinched. his body restless. He kept checking his phone, pacing in a tight half circle, muttering something I couldn't hear, and then he did something that froze my breath. He pressed a hand to his forehead, and he cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but a quiet collapse, a tremor in his shoulders, a staggering inhale. Tears he wiped quickly, angrily, like they betrayed him. My heart lurched, both toward him and away. I tried to reconcile the boy I raised, the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who carved pumpkins with me every Halloween, who cried when he found a dead bird outside our porch, with the man standing there now, drowning in something I couldn't name. He looked scared, terrified, even. But terrified of what? Losing money? Losing control? Losing me? I didn't know. Before I could think further, he turned sharply and kicked the front tire of his car with a fury I'd never seen in him. The sound echoed across my chest tightened. Whatever he was hiding, it was eating him alive. A knock at my door startled me. Mom? Calvin's voice. I jumped slightly, tea sloshing in the cup, heart thudding like a kicked drum. I hadn't expected him this soon. Mom, can I come in? I swallowed hard. My hand trembled just slightly as I set the cup down. Yes, I said. The door opened. He stepped inside, eyes red, face flushed from the cold, and whatever storm had been brewing inside him. Mom. His voice cracked. He looked at me like someone standing on the edge of a confession. We need to talk. I watched him carefully. His breath shook. His hands shook. His gaze darted around the room, like he was trying to gather the courage to say something weighty. Mom, he whispered again, pulling a crumpled envelope from his coat. I wasn't honest with you earlier. My stomach knotted. He sat on the chair, elbows on his knees, the envelope dangling loosely in his fingers. This all started because of something I didn't tell you, he said. Something I should have told you months ago. He swallowed hard, eyes filling again. I messed up. Really bad. My heart pounded. What did you do, Calvin? I whispered. He lifted his head slowly, and the words he said next opened a door neither of us would ever be able to close again. Mom, I owe money to someone dangerous. The room went still, completely still, as though time itself paused, holding its breath for what would come next. Dark well. I owe money to someone dangerous. For a moment, I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I didn't move. Calvin kept his eyes on the floor as though looking at me would shatter whatever thin courage he had left. Dangerous? I finally whispered. He nodded, shoulders collapsing inward as if the truth were too heavy to stand upright beneath. Mom, I wasn't trying to hurt you. I swear. He wiped his eyes roughly. I was trying to protect you. And then I made everything worse. A long, trembling silence stretched between us. How much do you owe? I wasn't sure why that was the first question out of my mouth. Maybe because I needed something tangible. A number, a measurement, something I could try to understand. He laughed bitterly. More than I can ever pay back. Not without. He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Not without doing things I don't want to do. My breath hitched. Is that why you sold my car? My furniture? His face crumpled, shame pouring over him like a breaking wave. Yes, and that's why you pushed me to come here. Not because you were worried, but because I thought keeping you out of the house would keep you safe. His voice was barely audible. These people, Mom, they don't wait. They don't negotiate. They take what they want. I stared at him, arms trembling inside the thin sleeves of my sweater. And you thought they would come to me? I didn't know. He cried, the words cracking open like something raw and bloody. I just panicked. They kept calling, threatening, showing up outside my office. I felt like I was drowning, and every time I tried to fix it, I made it worse. He slid the crumpled envelope across the table toward me. Inside, I could see papers, receipts, names, dates, amounts. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I was too busy staring at my son, the man who once believed his father could lift the sun with one hand, now hollowed out by fear and secrets. How long has this been going on? I asked quietly. He inhaled sharply, the air shaking in his chest. 8 months. 8 months. 8 months of him sinking deeper. 8 months of him hiding this from me. 8 months that led us to this moment. Two people sitting in a little beige nursing home room under fluorescent lights. The past between us like a cracked mirror. Why didn't you come to me before? I whispered. He stared at me, eyes glassy with something between guilt and longing. Because I didn't want you to see me like this. The silence that followed felt like winter. Long, cold, unforgiving. I thought of all the years I spent raising him. The scraped knees, the school plays, the nights he came home late, smelling like teenage recklessness and apologies. The college tuition I paid alone after his father died. The second chances I kept giving him. He wasn't a cruel man. He was a broken one. But brokenness doesn't excuse betrayal. Mom. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back. He froze. I'm not rejecting you, I said softly. But right now, I need to understand the truth before I can decide what to do with it. He nodded slowly, tears sliding down his cheeks. Unchecked. I'll tell you everything. So, he did. He told me about a business deal gone wrong, a construction investment that promised fast returns, and ended up being nothing more than a glossy scam. He told me he borrowed money to salvage it, then borrowed more to cover the first debt, then fell behind on payments, then panicked. He told me about a man named Rivas, the dangerous one. He said the name like someone speaking of a storm that might strike at any moment. He doesn't care who he destroys, Calvin said, voice trembling. When I couldn't pay on time, he started hinting I had other assets. My stomach twisted. Assets like what? Calvin couldn't meet my eyes. I understood anyway. Me, my house, my things, my life. I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle in painful, humiliating layers. When I opened them, Calvin was watching me with the helplessness of a child. What do I do, Mom? He whispered, please. I'm scared. The old instinct, the maternal one, rose up immediately, like a muscle memory. Hold him, protect him, fix it, fight the monsters under his bed. But this time, the monster wasn't under the bed. He had opened the door and let it in. Mom, he whispered again, voice breaking. I need you. I inhaled slowly. You don't need me, I said gently. You need consequences. He flinched like I had struck him. You need a lawyer, I continued. You need Michael. You need the police. You need accountability. He shook his head violently. You don't understand. These people don't care about police. They care about leverage, I cut in. And you don't have any. But I do. He looked at me, confused and terrified all at once. I spoke to Michael today, I said. Before you came, I told him everything. Calvin's face went slack. You what? And he's already started putting protections in place. On the house. On my finances. On everything you tried to sell. His breath thickened. Mama, no. No, you don't know these people. I know fear, I said calmly. And I know how to stop running from it. He squeezed his eyes shut as if trying to rewind time. Mom, they're going to come after me. Then we face it, I said. But we face it with the law, with truth, with professionals, not with hiding, and not by sacrificing me. Tears streamed down his face now, steady, desperate, quiet. What about me? He whispered, voice small. What's going to happen to me? I looked at my son, the man who betrayed me. Yes, but also the frightened child inside the man. And I felt both the ache of love and the sting of hurt. That, I said softly, depends on the choices you make from here. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking. I reached out, not to comfort him, not yet, but to place my hand gently on the envelope between us. Tomorrow, I said, you're going to sit with Michael and tell him everything. Then we decide the next step. He didn't look up, but he nodded. Do you still love me? His voice was barely a breath. I closed my eyes. That question pierced deeper than anything else. When I opened them again, my answer came out in a whisper, soft, steady, and unbearably true. Always. But right now, I don't trust you. His face broke like a man hearing a verdict he knew he deserved. I stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the night was thick and dark, but somewhere far off I could see the faintest suggestion of dawn, trying to push through the horizon. Calvin, I said without turning, go home. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be hard. He rose on shaky legs. I'm sorry. Mom, he whispered from the door. This time, I didn't reply. I listened to the door close. And only then, only when the room was silent again, did I let myself cry. These weren't the tears of a victim. These were the tears of a mother finally choosing herself. I barely slept that night. Not because of fear, though fear certainly sat with me, a silent third companion in the narrow bed, but because something inside me had shifted. It was as if a long-closed window in my chest had finally cracked open, letting in a new, colder wind that carried both clarity and ache by morning. I felt older than 83, but I also felt sharper. When Nurse Leela came in at dawn to check my blood pressure, she looked at me with concern. You didn't sleep, she said quietly. I've slept enough in my life. I answered. She wheeled in a tray with oatmeal, fruit, and a tiny glass of orange juice. I didn't touch it. My mind was already somewhere else. Today's the day? She asked. Yes, I said. I want this done. She hesitated, then touched my arm gently. You're stronger than you think, Margaret. I gave her a faint smile. I've learned strength doesn't roar. It whispers. Enough. By 10 a.m., Michael arrived, not with a suit and briefcase like he usually wore, but with rolled-up sleeves, a folder under his arm, and a determined expression that made him look 20 years younger. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. He sat in the chair beside my bed. Before your son gets here, we need to review a few things. He opened the folder. Legal documents, statements, proof of ownership, bank protections, all laid out in neat, ironclad lines. You are fully protected, he said. Calvin can't sell anything else. He can't take loans against your home, your car. The title was never transferred, and the buyer has agreed to return it pending police investigation. Your furniture is being traced. A strange relief washed over me, a relief tinged with sorrow. And Calvin? I asked. He sighed. That depends on how much he cooperates. But he will face charges, not from you, but from the state. Elder financial abuse is felony level. The word felony squeezed my heart like a fist. My son, my only child. But this was the cost of truth. The cost of ending a cycle that could have destroyed both of USA knock interrupted my thoughts. Calvin stepped in, hair uncombed, clothes wrinkled, face pale with exhaustion. He looked like the aftermath of a storm. Mom. His voice frayed when he saw Michael. We're doing this now? Yes, I said. He sat, not with the arrogance he often displayed in his adult life, but with the clumsy obedience of a man who has finally run out of lies to hide behind. Michael leaned forward. Calvin, I'm your mother's attorney. I'm not yours. I'm here to protect her interests, not yours. Do you understand? Calvin swallowed hard. I do. Good. Then you'll answer every question truthfully. What followed was not a conversation. It was an unraveling. Michael asked. Calvin confessed, piece by piece. The deception was stripped bare. The loans, the forged signatures he tried to create but failed because the notary refused. The threats, the lies he told the buyers of my furniture, the pressure from Rivas, the panic, and finally, the moment he decided to put me here. It wasn't to hurt her, he said through tears. I swear, I just needed time to fix things. Michael's voice softened. And did you fix them? Calvin looked at his shaking hands. No, that's why we're here, Michael said firmly. To stop this before someone else gets hurt. Calvin's head dropped into his hands. What's going to happen to me? That depends on what you do next, Michael answered. But jail time is possible. Restitution, loss of inheritance, supervision, probation, court-ordered programs. My son sobbed, and for the first time, I did not rush to comfort him. Instead, I looked out the window, at the trees swaying under a pale autumn sun. Their branches looked like hands, reaching, bending, breaking in the wind but still rooted. I was one of those trees. I had bent long enough. At noon, Michael left us to talk privately. For a long time, we didn't speak. Calvin stared at the floor. I stared at the ceiling. Two people stitched together by blood, torn apart by choices. Finally, he said, I didn't know how to stop. I nodded. Addiction takes many forms. Yours was desperation. He breathed out, defeated. Do you hate me? No, I said. I hate what fear turned you into. He looked up, eyes red. Can you ever forgive me? Forgiveness, such a fragile, dangerous word. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But healing isn't a switch. It's a slow walk. He nodded, tears dripping down his chin. I reached out and took his hand. Not to fix him, not to excuse him, only to remind both of us that love can exist even inside brokenness. He squeezed my hand back, sobbing quietly. But I didn't fall apart this time. I stayed steady, because this moment wasn't about losing a son, that it was about reclaiming myself. After he left, Leela brought me a fresh cup of tea, chamomile, steaming gently, fragrant with something warm and comforting. You did something incredibly brave today, she said.
Alive, and oddly curious about what the day might bring. I brewed a small cup of tea in my kitchenette and stood at the balcony window, watching the horizon blush with morning light. Willowhaven was still quiet, only a few early risers walking under the oaks. Birds hopped across the brick pathways as if claiming them anew each morning. A knock broke the silence. When I opened the door, Beatrice stood there, energetic as ever, wearing a bright green scarf and holding a clipboard. Rise and shine, Margaret. Today's your orientation. Orientation? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, yes, she said, sweeping inside like a breeze. Every new resident gets a full tour and introduction. Rules, resources, social groups, volunteer programs, the works. And you, she tapped my shoulder, are already famous. Oh dear, I sighed. Not for scandal, she teased, for strength. I didn't respond. Sometimes silence is the only answer pride can manage without trembling. Put on something warm, she said. Mornings here bite like a small dog. I laughed, the kind of small, surprised laugh that reminded me my heart still knew how. After dressing, I followed her downstairs. The community center was alive with movement when we arrived. Some residents played cards, others read newspapers with large magnifiers. A small group practiced gentle yoga in a corner, their limbs slow but determined. This, she said proudly, is where life happens. We walked from room to room. A library filled with well-loved books and soft chairs, a craft room with shelves of paints, fabrics, and wooden whittling blocks, a modest gym with more therapy bands than treadmills, an airy hall where meetings and gatherings took place. This place is a sanctuary, she whispered at one point, but it's also a fortress. We protect each other. I felt that truth resonating in the quiet strength of the space. Now, she said, pausing in the hallway, I want to introduce you to someone. She led me toward an office near the back. Inside sat a tall woman with short gray hair and a calm, assertive expression. Her office shelves were filled with binders labeled advocacy, safety, guardianship, elder rights, community defense. This is Claire Sandova, Beatrice announced, our resident advocate. Claire stood, extending a hand. Margaret, I've been wanting to meet you. Oh, I asked, shaking her hand. I've heard you handled something very difficult with dignity, and people here admire that. Her eyes were steady, not prying, not pitying. She looked at me as though I had done something brave instead of merely surviving. I tried, I said. She gestured for me to sit. I run the Elder Rights Circle here. We help residents who've been financially or emotionally exploited, sometimes even abused. You'd be surprised how many folks walk through those doors with stories like yours. My breath caught. Stories like mine? She nodded. More than you imagine. A heaviness settled in the room, the shared understanding of wounds carried in silence. I don't want what happened to me to define me, I said softly. Then let it empower you, Claire replied. Not just for you, for others. Her words nudged something awake in me, something I had pushed aside most of my adult life, the instinct to help, to guide, to protect. The same instinct that once made me a good mother when Calvin still needed one. What would that involve? I asked. Whatever you have the energy for, Claire said. Listening, sharing, supporting, helping file reports, simply being present. Experience is sometimes the most powerful tool. I sat with that. 83 years of life behind me. Joys, losses, missteps, resilience. A lifetime of learning what it means to endure without becoming hard. A heart bruised, but still open. Yes, I said slowly. I'd like to be part of this. Claire smiled. Welcome to the circle. Later that afternoon, after the tour and paperwork, I wandered toward the garden near the pond. A quiet escape brushed with the sense of damp earth and jasmine. The man in the white cap stood there again, trimming dead stems from a row of chrysanthemums. Hello, I said. He looked up. A warm smile touched his eyes. Ah, the newcomer who walks like she's deciding if she should stay. I chuckled. And have I decided? You have the look of someone who has carried a heavy burden, he said gently. And those who carry burdens don't leave places like this. They find home in them. How wise, I murmured. Oh, heavens no, he said with a laugh. Just old. We stood quietly for a moment. Name's Arthur, he said at last. Arthur Bennett. Margaret. He nodded as though tasting the name. Well, Margaret, he said, if you ever want company on a walk, I'm usually out here most afternoons. I appreciate that, I said. I may take you up on it. Please do, he said. Solitude is good, but too much of it eats at the bones. He handed me a freshly cut chrysanthemum for your room. I accepted it with a soft smile. Thank you. Of course, he said. We take care of our own. When I returned to my apartment, the sun had dipped low, casting golden light across the floor. I placed the chrysanthemum in a small glass jar and set it on my windowsill. It looked simple, beautiful, alive. And so did I. I sat near the window as evening settled, watching the shadows stretch and the courtyard fill with the soft hum of community, voices, laughter, footsteps, the gentle rhythm of lives intertwining. I had spent so long fearing the next loss, the next betrayal, the next moment when life would crumble beneath me. But here, in this new place, I felt something different blooming inside me, something that felt like strength, something that felt like purpose, something that felt like rebirth. I whispered to myself, this is my life now. And for the first time in a long time, the words felt like a promise rather than a plea. The room went impossibly still. Calvin didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just stared at the grain of the wooden table as if tracing an escape route carved into it. I watched him not as a mother this time, but as a woman confronting the final remnants of a heartbreak she had carried for 40 years. Calvin, I whispered, look at me. He didn't. Charisse shifted next to me, her hand resting lightly on my arm, steadying me the way someone steadies a trembling stair rail, gently, quietly, respectfully. Mom, Calvin finally breathed, his voice thin. Please don't do this here. I'm doing it exactly where you left me, in a place where strangers took better care of me than my own son. He winced. Not because the words were harsh, but because they were true. The truth is the only knife that never misses. I took a slow breath. You didn't put me in that care home because you were overwhelmed. You put me in that care home because you needed my house, my car, my things. I swallowed the burn rising in my throat. You needed my life to fix yours. He rubbed his face with both hands, his voice cracking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Charisse leaned forward slightly, her posture still but full of heat. Calvin, she could have died in that place. Do you understand that? His eyes snapped toward her, wounded. This isn't your business. She fired back. It became my business the moment she pressed that emergency button. She reached for hope, and all she got was a nurse who couldn't find her son. Her words landed like stones. Calvin stood abruptly, his chair scraping the tile. I can't. I'm not doing this. Sit, I said. He froze. There are moments in life when a mother's voice carries the weight of every year she has lived. I felt all 83 behind mine. Slowly, he sat. I studied him, really studied him, the way you study a child who grew into someone you no longer understand. His hairline was thinning. His eyes were ringed with worry. His fingers tapped the table like he was fighting something inside himself. "Where is my car, Calvin?" His jaw clenched. Gone. Gone where? He closed his eyes. "I sold it." My heart didn't break. "No," I said softly. "I did something overdue." She smiled knowingly. Sometimes those are the bravest acts of all. I sipped my tea, hands trembling slightly. "Lila," I said, "I want to move." "Move?" "Yes, not back to my house, not here. Somewhere where I can start again." She tilted her head. "Like a senior cooperative? You'd be perfect there." I felt it, the truth, the freedom, the next step settling into place. A senior cooperative, a community, a life not defined by fear or abandonment, a place where I could use what happened to me to protect others, a place where I could become more than the victim my son assumed I'd always be. "I want to apply," I said. Her smile widened, warm and proud. "Then let's get you started." That night, alone in my little room, I looked at the empty hallway beyond my door, the soft lights, the distant sound of footsteps, the faint beeping of medical monitors far off. I felt peace. Not because everything was solved, but because I had finally taken my life back. I picked up my journal and wrote a single line. "My dignity is not something you can sell." When I set the pen down, I exhaled, slow, long, and full of a strength I had forgotten I possessed. Today had been painful, but it was also the beginning of something new. A new chapter, a new home, a new purpose, a new Margaret, one who chose herself. And though the path ahead would not be easy, I felt ready, because the worst had already happened, and I had survived it. The morning I officially left the nursing home felt strange, as if the air itself held its breath while I packed the last of my things. A pair of soft slippers, my father's old pocket watch, a photograph of my wedding day, edges curled from decades of living, and a sweater I'd knitted the winter Calvin turned 12, its fibers still carrying the faint memory of fireplace smoke and innocence. I folded each item carefully, not because they were valuable, but because I was. Because this time I was moving by choice. Lila saw me off at the front door. "You sure you don't want me to walk you out?" she asked, hands tucked into her scrubs. "I've walked myself through more storms than you know," I said with a small smile. "I'll be all right." She hugged me, warm, firm, the kind of hug that tells you someone genuinely cares. "You call me if you need anything, okay? Anything." "I will," I promised. When I stepped outside, the late morning sun rested on my skin like a blessing. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and distance. the scent of possibility. Michael pulled up a moment later, waving through the windshield. The trunk of his car was already open. "Ready for your new chapter?" he asked as he took my bags. "Yes," I said, and felt the truth of it settle in my bones. The senior cooperative, Willow Haven, sat atop a gentle hill overlooking a cluster of oak trees and a small pond. It didn't feel like a care home. It felt like a neighborhood built on second chances. Warm brick walkways, garden beds filled with chrysanthemums, laughter drifting from an open courtyard, and people. Older, yes, but not resigned. They moved with purpose, with dignity, with the quiet confidence of those who had survived the world and learned to breathe afterward. I liked it already. As we walked toward the reception office, an older man with a white cap nodded at me. "New resident?" he asked. "Yes." "Welcome home," he said with a gentle smile. Those two words suddenly felt dangerously close to tears. Inside, a woman named Beatrice, thin, lively, with silver curls bouncing when she moved, handed me a folder of welcome documents. "You'll find we take independence seriously here," she said proudly, "but we take abuse even more seriously. If someone hurts one of ours, they answer to all of us." I blinked at her. "All of you?" She gave me a conspiratorial wink. "We're old, dear, not powerless." Something warm stirred in my chest, a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. Michael stepped aside to make a phone call, leaving me to explore my new apartment. It was modest, soft beige walls, a window overlooking the courtyard, wooden floors touched by afternoon sunlight. It felt like quiet freedom. When I placed my belongings on the bed, my hand trembled slightly, a mix of relief, grief, and the strange excitement of beginning again at 83. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, letting the stillness settle around me. And then the phone rang. I knew the number before I answered. "Mom?" Calvin's voice was fragile, tentative. "Yes," I said, steadying myself. "Michael told me you moved. I didn't know it would be today." It was time. I, I wanted to see you," he said softly, "but I didn't want to make things harder." I closed my eyes. "You didn't make anything harder by not coming." He exhaled shakily. "I'm starting the paperwork. For the restitution. For everything." "That's good," I said. "Accountability is a beginning. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a beginning." "I, I miss you," he whispered, "even if I don't deserve to." That softened something in me. Not enough to heal, but enough to breathe. "Calvin," I said gently, "you need to learn to exist without using someone else's strength as a crutch. That's your work now." "I know," he said. I,
I'm trying. I hope you keep trying. A moment of silence stretched between us, filled with things said and unsaid. I love you, Mom, he said. I let the words linger, then answered quietly. I love you too, but loving someone doesn't mean letting them break you.
He cried. I could hear it through the line. But for once, I didn't break with him. I held my ground. You take care of yourself, I said. You too, he whispered. And then the call ended. Not in anger, not in despair, but in the fragile calm of two people learning how to love each other with truth, not illusion. Later that afternoon, Beatrice introduced me to the community. We sat in a warm room filled with comfortable chairs and the soft hum of conversation. People shared their names, their stories, widowhood, retirement, heartbreak, survival. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. My name is Margaret, I said. I'm 83, and I'm here because I have decided to start living for myself. A soft murmur of approval drifted through the room. And I continued, feeling something brave rise inside me, because I want to help others do the same, especially those who feel forgotten, especially the ones who've been taken advantage of. Beatrice clasped her hands, eyes bright. I knew I liked you. People nodded, smiled, some even clapped. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A purpose that wasn't tied to being someone's mother or wife or burden. A purpose tied only to me. That evening, after unpacking the last of my belongings, I stepped outside onto the little balcony that overlooked the courtyard. The sun was just beginning to sink, casting long golden streaks across the pavement. In the distance, I saw the man in the white cap tending to a bed of chrysanthemums. A pair of women walked by with knitting baskets. Laughter floated through the air like soft music. I took a deep breath. This was not the ending of my life. It was the beginning of my ownership of it. I rested my hands on the railing, letting the cool metal anchor me to the moment. I thought of Calvin, his tears, his confession, his fear. I thought of the years that shaped both of us, his mistakes, my enabling, our shared patterns of silence. And then I thought of this place, this new life, this new Margaret. I whispered to myself, I am not done. The words drifted upward, carried on the evening breeze, soft but certain. For the first time in a long time, I believed them. I woke before dawn the next morning, not because of nightmares, not because of noise, but because of something far quieter. Peace. It rested in my chest like a warm stone, grounding me. For the first time in months, I didn't wake with a knot in my stomach or the dread of wondering what would be taken from me next. Instead, I felt present. It had already broken the day he left me in that room with the tiny window and the silent hallways. This was just the echo. And the furniture? I asked. He let out a dry, humorless laugh. You already know. I nodded. Tell me anyway. It's gone too. His voice was barely audible. I had debts, Mom. Real debts. I was drowning. The house, the car, it was the only way. By abandoning me? I whispered. His eyes filled. Mom, I thought they'd take care of you. I thought it was temporary. Cherise scoffed under her breath. You didn't even visit. Something inside him buckled. He looked smaller, younger, as if the years suddenly slipped off him and left behind the scared boy who once clung to my skirt when thunder shook the windows. He whispered something then, so quietly it barely reached the air. I didn't visit because I was ashamed. I blinked. I knew once I saw you, I'd have to face what I did. Cherise's expression softened for just a second. Mine didn't. Because the truth isn't softened by tears. Guilt is not love. Guilt is just fear wearing a nicer jacket. He nodded, shoulders shaking. Mom, tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix it. I exhaled deeply. You can't undo what you sold, and you can't return the months I lost in that place. His face twisted in pain. But, I continued, you can start by telling the truth to my lawyer tomorrow morning. Every detail, every lie, every signature that wasn't mine. His breath hitched. You're pressing charges? No, I said softly. I'm protecting myself. Cherise's hand tightened slightly on mine. I'm not here to punish you, Calvin. I'm here because I finally realized that loving you does not mean letting you destroy me. A silence so deep fell between us that even the refrigerator hums seemed to fade. Then I added, gently, painfully, you may be my son, but I have a life too, and I deserve to live what's left of it without fear. He covered his face and sobbed, real, unguarded sobs, the kind he hadn't allowed since childhood. I let him cry. But I didn't reach across the table. A mother's forgiveness is a bridge, but even a bridge requires the other person to walk across it. When he finally quieted, he whispered something then, so quietly it barely reached the air. Will you still talk to me after tomorrow? I didn't lie. I didn't offer comfort I wasn't sure I could give. I don't know, I said. That depends on what you do next. His shoulders slumped in defeat. But somewhere in the room, maybe in the stillness, maybe in the brokenness, a seed of something small appeared. Not hope, but possibility. The faintest possibility of repair. The next morning was cold, the kind that bites gently at your skin but wakes something inside you, something fierce, something wanting to live. Cherise drove me downtown. She adjusted the heat so my hands wouldn't stiffen. She asked if I wanted music. I didn't. Silence felt right. Silence was honest. At the lawyer's office, Calvin arrived late, but he arrived. His suit was wrinkled. His face looked hollow from a sleepless night. But he came. And for the first time in months, maybe years, he sat beside me instead of across from me. His confession unfolded slowly, painfully, truthfully. He admitted everything. The forged signatures, the quick sale of my car, the disappearing furniture, and the months of silence while he figured out a plan he never had. My lawyer, a steady man with a voice like sanded wood, asked questions. Calvin answered them without excuses. It was the first real step he'd taken toward me in a long time. When it was over, the lawyer turned to me. Margaret, given his cooperation, you can either pursue full restitution legally or you can settle privately with safeguards. It's your call. Calvin looked at me then, not hopeful, not begging, just waiting. A child waits with hope. A grown man waits with consequence. I stood slowly. I don't want the court to punish my son, but I will not be unprotected. The lawyer nodded. Calvin nodded too, eyes lowered, accepting. We drafted the agreement. He must repay what he sold. He cannot access any of my accounts again. He must enroll in financial counseling, and he must check in every week, not for my sake, but for his. He signed every page without hesitation. When it was done, we stepped outside into the winter air. Charisse stood a little away, giving us space. Calvin turned to me, snow dusting his hair, his breath forming clouds between us. "Mom," he began, voice shaking, "I know I lost your trust, but I want to earn it back, even if it takes the rest of my life." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw the boy he used to be and the man he was trying desperately to become. "You don't earn trust with words, Calvin. You earn it with change." He nodded, and then, slowly, carefully, I reached out and touched his cheek, just lightly, just once. Then I turned and walked toward Charisse, not because I was leaving him behind, but because I was walking toward myself, toward the life that was still mine to live. As we drove away, I looked out the window at a world that suddenly felt a little bigger, a little brighter, a little more possible. My car was gone. My furniture was gone. My home was bruised by betrayal, but my spirit wasn't. Sometimes life takes everything you built just to give you back the one thing you forgot was yours.